Story 1. I moved and tried to maintain the friendships, but then I realized I was the only one reaching out to see how they were doing. It's disappointing because you can't make old friends. Story 2. She told our entire friend group that I was a massive liar and doing things to get attention. She even tried to stage an intervention to help me with my apparent pathological lying. Except everyone in the friend group knew I couldn't lie at all. The final straw was when she told everyone that my grandmother wasn't dying and that I was lying about it for attention because going off treatment meant she was getting better. No, it meant she was going to stop all life-sustaining support. She died less than 5 days after making that decision, and I realized that I didn't want to be friends with someone who would be so cruel while I was beginning to grieve. Story 3. When she took her anger and frustration out on me, even though I was the only one there for her, I showed up for her in many ways. One day, after she took it out on me, I said I was done. We had been friends since middle school for over 15 years. Story 4. I found out that she had slept with my then fiancé in our bed, while I was in a long-term psychiatric program to get my life together. The worst part was that she would visit me in the unit, pretending to care and wanting to see me home soon. Safe to say, I ended both relationships after that. Story 5. I had to cut off a friend I had known since middle school last year. The final straw was when she kept talking behind my back and then acted innocent when I called her out. Took me a long time to let go, but I feel much lighter now. Story 6. We lived together. I went away for 4 months to train for a new job. When I got back, he and his companion had moved out and left the place in a disastrous condition, complete with pet urine and other damage everywhere. They had left half of their belongings strewn about, causing holes in the walls and doors in their private rooms, a terrible mess in the bathroom, and rotting food in the kitchen. The final straw was when I called the landlord. He informed me that my friend and his associate hadn't paid rent in 5 months, totaling over $7,000. I tried to call my soon-to-be ex-friend and track him down using mutual acquaintances, but he completely stopped responding. Fast forward 10 months, and the landlord is suing us for damages and rent owed. I attended the arbitration hearing, but he did not show up. Instead, he sent his associate in his place. I found out they both had filed for bankruptcy, and the arbitrator ruled that their liability would be determined in bankruptcy court, leading to their liability being discharged. I ended up being responsible for the bill and worked out a deal with the landlord to pay him $6,000 of the $25,000 he was seeking and called it a day. I repaid every penny. I haven't spoken to him since. In closing, I wish you both nothing but the worst. Story 7. I realized she deliberately pursued every man I had ever shown even the slightest interest in, just to prove that she was more desirable. Every single one. That's not a friend. That's a snake in your yard. Story 8. I realized that I did all the mental and emotional work in the relationship and that I was being used. I understood she would never change. I waited years for her to show effort and change. Felt like a light switch turned off as I slowly pulled away. Story 9. All they wanted to do was party and go to the casino. In hindsight, they were very disrespectful. However, I became the bad person for not wanting to get drunk in the middle of the work week. Story 10. Her constant criticism and put-downs reminded me too much of my mother's behavior, who was an alcoholic and narcissist. As much as I like her, I cannot allow myself to be the focus of someone's negativity. I suspect she needs some deep therapy, but she will not start the process. Therefore, I had to walk away. It is unfortunate. She has become a self-fulfilling prophecy, believing that everyone hates her and will leave. Story 11. She had an opioid addiction. I supported her in every way I could, including offering to pay for rehabilitation, but she didn't want to go, which I completely understood. I told her I was here for her when she was ready. I stood by her and defended her for years. She was my best friend. I thought she would always be there for me too. Then I had a crisis. I lost 30 pounds in about 6 weeks, almost lost my home, and was in a very dark place. She was there for me, or so I thought. During this rough period, she kept pushing me to try oxycodone. I never did hard drugs. It was really hard to say no because my mind wasn't clear. One night, she was literally chasing me around the room, trying to force drugs down my throat. That was it for me. I realized that instead of her lifting me up, she was trying to pull me down into the darkness. I recognized that the entire friendship was centered around her and her addiction. I had enough. I said goodbye, blocked her number, and found another job because we worked together. My heart still misses her, but I never want that type of friend again. Story 12. It was a combination of factors that reached a point I could no longer tolerate. We had been friends for over 15 years, though people always asked me why. By the time I ended the friendship, I had noticed for a while that whenever I spent time with her, I felt terrible about myself. It was only in her company. Otherwise, I quite liked myself. I also observed that she had a very flexible idea of the truth, changing it according to convenience. I am fairly certain she mentioned cheating on her new husband in conversation with me just before the end. It made me feel sick. She was, and from what I sometimes hear still is, obsessed with physical appearances, considering them the greatest source of value for a person. This obsession only worsened with age. I realized she was utterly superficial and skilled at pretending to have depth. She manipulated me regarding my own behavior. She was dull. I also knew that if I addressed the issues directly, she would successfully manipulate me into staying in contact and make it my fault. I'm not proud of it, but I ended communication with her. She wasn't good for me, and at the time, I lacked the strength to withstand her abusive behavior. I view it as a way of saving myself. Story 13. He refused to come see me or try to make plans. He lived in another city, so I always traveled there by public transit. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he hadn't even met my long-term girlfriend. I made plans to see him, but on the day I did, it was storming heavily, so I canceled. I received a harsh response, so I told him to leave me alone. He was my childhood best friend. He never kept any friends either. Once I walked away, I realized how selfish and awful he was. He dragged me into so much trouble when we were kids. Last I heard, he's nearly 40, with no job, living off his wife's parents' generosity. Story 14. He called me over to express his feelings about being suicidal, then proceeded to make advances toward me despite my clear lack of interest. He has complained about the same two people who have made him miserable for years, yet he continues to keep them in his life. I went over right after work, listened to him cry, but he kept touching my legs and telling me how attractive I looked. I scooted away, but he persisted. I am also in a relationship which he has always resented. There were other issues, but that was the final straw. I called a rideshare service and cut him off. I cannot be his therapist, and my body is not a solution to his problems. Story 15. We have been friends since elementary school and are both in our mid-30s now. He accused me of stealing from him about 4 years ago. I told him directly that if he really thinks I did, he should stay out of my life. I helped him out of jail before this incident. He has been slowly trying to re-enter my life, but that is not happening. I have read similar sentiments before, but do not confuse the length of a friendship with its depth. Story 16. I asked her to testify for me during my child custody case involving domestic violence and other types of abuse. We had been friends for 25 years at that point. She said she did not want to get involved. She had always been selfish, and it was my fault for allowing her to behave that way for so long. This was the final straw for me. Story 17. They stopped responding to my contact attempts after their marriage. I hope they are enjoying a beautiful life together. Story 18. A so-called friend was using my life as an excuse to scam money from nonprofits while I was working to pay my own way. I wondered what I did to upset a group of people. I asked myself if it was something I said or if I had been canceled. I questioned if my ethnicity was a factor. In the end, I discovered I was used as a pawn in a scam. Story 19. He went deep into extreme views, started talking about how Russia is a paradise and vaccines are part of a conspiracy, claiming the election was stolen. Essentially, his rational thinking has disappeared, and what remains is a shadow of his former self. It is sad to see someone become so influenced that their original personality seems to vanish. Story 20. He told my wife I had cheated on her, which was not true. It ruined my 11-year relationship and cost me custody of my daughter. just because she couldn't have me. This led to my becoming a depressed alcoholic. I guess that's a final straw. Story 21. He was a friend from college and a COVID-19 denier. When my otherwise healthy coworker died from it, he was rude, dismissive, and sarcastic. That was that. Story 22. They became what we now know as Ultra MAGA. There was no other topic they cared about other than how liberals were harming the country. It's surprising because they were not like that, so seeing them devolve into this was both fascinating and sad. Story 23. I cut out the entire friend group. My best friend at the time had been my close friend for 17 years, but she aggressively attempted to sleep with my husband. He told me and showed me proof. I removed her from my life, and all our friends sided with her, saying I should forgive her and that I was choosing some guy over her. They claimed I was causing tension in the friend group by refusing to be around her, and it was making them choose who to invite to events. I told them not to worry about inviting me again. They could have her, and I blocked them all. That was over 25 years ago. I've been widowed for 8.5 years now and still feel like I made the right decision. I ignored each of their friend requests when they reached out after he died. My attitude is still the same. They can go away. When he and I did the friends and family introductions, she told me, "He looks more my type than yours. He's too attractive for you. You look weird together." I borrowed her phone one day to call him and let him know mine was broken and what time I would be home. Unbeknownst to me, she saved the phone number and started texting him the moment I left. He began telling me, "Nicole's not a good friend and Nicole isn't trustworthy," and he would avoid any interaction with her. One day, she called me at work and asked if he was home, saying she needed to drop something off. I told her to go ahead, but when I called to inform him she was on her way over, he refused to allow her there without me. She showed up anyway, so he drove to my job and waited in a public area for me. It was quite odd. When I got off work, he immediately showed me the text messages where she initially pretended to want to plan a surprise party for me, but quickly started telling him how attractive she thought he was. She asked if he liked oral sex, then sent explicit photos, claiming he was too attractive for someone as unattractive as me, and that I would never have to know. He told her she was a terrible friend and blocked her. Story 24. No specific events stood out. I had two friends who consistently ignored my growth as a person and treated me as if I were still in high school. I realized that I would always be held back by them and that I could not achieve my goals in life with them around. It's been 10 years, and I am even more successful than I ever dreamed. I often feel extremely lucky, but my wonderful girlfriend keeps me grounded and reminds me that I have always been fortunate, and my intelligence ultimately allowed me to break free. Story 25. She got angry with me for not responding to her messages for 5 days. I had been in the hospital in a coma. Even after explaining that, she remained upset. We had been friends for 20 years, so that was difficult. Story 26. This happens to me for some reason, which I believe means it's a personal issue. The final straw has often been whether I felt like I was either defending myself for having an opinion related to my feelings almost every time we met or feeling like they decided the investment in the friendship was no longer worth reciprocating a similar amount of energy or consideration. Whether it's a proximity issue or an emotional reserve issue, if we've gone a year or two without talking, you probably don't need to reach out. Story 27. We were friends for over 30 years. I discovered that during that time, he made fun of me behind my back and spread rumors among our friends that I was stingy. I will never speak to him again. Story 28. When they were upset that I was unable to take time off work for my new job and fly across the country for her baby shower, I offered to visit shortly after the baby was born when I knew I would be able to take time off. I also felt I could be more helpful at that time post-birth. When it became clear that the only way to resolve the conflict in their minds was for me to apologize profusely, I realized that the dynamics of our relationship had become too unbalanced, and I could no longer maintain those types of friendships at that stage in my life. Story 29. Telling me I think I'm better than everyone just because I wanted to get sober and quit going on drug escapades. Then there was endless negativity while I was in my early stages of recovery. Story 30. I had a friend who knew I disliked being around drunk people. One day, I was driving home on a 4-hour trip late at night around 10 p.m. My friend texted me to ask where I was. It turned out I was driving through the city where he and a couple of our other community college friends were, and he told me they wanted me to drop by and say hello. I showed up, and everyone was surprised to see me. None of them knew my friend had asked me to come by, but they were welcoming. The real reason my friend wanted me over was that he had gotten very drunk and wanted to keep partying, but his original ride home wanted to go home and call it a night. This ride came to me and told me he was leaving, asking if I could take my friend home with me. I replied that I was planning to leave too, as there was no reason for me to stay. The guy asked me to let my friend know I was leaving, so while I was finding my friend to tell him, the ride just left, leaving me there. This was a time when my friendship with my friend was already a bit rocky, but I wasn't going to abandon him. I told him I wanted to get home because it had been a long day for me considering the drive. My friend said he was going to say goodbye to a couple of friends, and I spent another hour and a half tracking him down as he kept drinking. Finally, I said enough, telling a friend of mine that if he saw my drunk friend in the next 10 minutes to let him know I was leaving, and I would wait a total of 15 minutes in my car before taking off without him. Sure enough, while I was waiting in my car, my friend came out, got in, and while completely drunk, told me I was being rude for not letting him say goodbye to everyone. I told him I was doing him a favor by taking him home this late at night, despite how tired I was from my long day. Then, because we still had an hour left to drive home, we repeated the same conversation several times, as he was too drunk to remember. He berated me about it every 5 minutes for a whole hour. He even threw up in my car and told me to go away after he did. When I got him home and walked him into his apartment and to bed, I told myself I would never speak to him again. I haven't seen him since, and I'm all the better for it. Story 31. I knew my girlfriend was having an affair. She didn't tell me. The whole group knew, and they are all gone. Story 32. She married an Asian English immigrant and has 2 Asian children who experienced bullying at school. She viewed my child as an extension of her daily life. My child is transgender. Then she voted for Trump. Story 33. I have had a best friend since high school. I turned 60 this year. He was an empathetic individual until he reconnected with and married his college girlfriend when we were in our 40s. She is as shallow as a person can be. He went over 5 years without asking how I was doing, despite the fact that I supported him during a minor heart attack that frightened him. I had an accident where it was uncertain if I would walk again, and he never visited me in the hospital, even though I was there for 4 weeks and the hospital was only 5 miles from his house. Years later, we were on the phone, living nearly 1,000 miles apart, and I got fed up with his constant focus on himself and his problems. I told him to go away. That was it, the end of our friendship. It's unfortunate because I don't have any friends today. I consider myself a good friend, a good listener, and one who offers advice when asked while also providing silence when someone needs to vent. Life can be difficult, can't it? Story 34. I had a meltdown because I ran out of cigarettes. He worked over 40 hours a week while I was unemployed at the time. He caused a significant hole in my wall on the way out, and I never allowed him back in. Story 35. Very much a case of the straw that broke the camel's back. There was the stealing from me repeatedly, mind you. I didn't confront him about all of it. There was the belittling and bullying in front of others to make himself look better or get attention. There was the time he flipped and was suddenly into all these kinks, actively chasing women for experiences. It also became apparent that this person hung around more when things were plentiful but was missing in action when things were sparse. If we had it, money, drugs, alcohol, they were visiting, often unannounced. Then there was the time he changed his entire appearance to something that, in the 17 years I have known him, he would have never done. He went extreme goth in his 40s. Makeup, tattoos, piercings, all black. He must have spent well over $1,000 on just cosmetics outside of his wardrobe. This later changed as he adopted a more beachy look when he wasn't having much luck in the scene. He bailed on a joint family holiday that was fully paid for by me to hang out with a woman he had just met. Yes, we spent money on his accommodation, permits, and food to cater for the extra mouths. He canceled on the day we were to leave, claiming sick kids. However, his ex-wife, who got the kids later in the day because he needed space to see his new fling, confirmed that they were not sick and were upset about not going on the promised holiday, which we had planned well in advance. This included dropping off the kids with bogus symptoms such as a fever, while one child was wearing layers of clothing in a hot climate. There is more. Honestly, I let this person be in my life longer than I should have. Story 36. During the height of COVID-19, she, an elementary school teacher, traveled from student to student for educational checkups without a mask to prove that spreading the disease wasn't real. I ended our friendship after over 30 years. Story 37. I was in the hospital after almost dying. Life flight helicopters were involved. She had her first real boyfriend and was too busy with him to care if I was alive or dead. After a week of silence, I blocked her on everything and focused on my recovery. She was in her mid-30s at this point. We weren't teenagers. She was just bad at dating. Story 38. My former American friend started, quite unexpectedly, defending the Republican Party and Donald Trump while spreading misinformation and conspiracies in 2020. It was a significant shock for me. As much as it hurt, I had no choice but to end the friendship. Story 39. She agreed to go on a trip with me, which was inconvenient for me to accommodate, but I wanted her to come. After everything was finalized except for her plane ticket, she backed out because she mixed up the dates, leaving me to travel alone. My plane ticket is booked, and I now have to travel 5 hours away to a different city instead of the 2 hours I could have managed originally. Additionally, I have to pay for hotel rooms and stay the night alone in this city because it is so far out of the way, all for her not to even end up coming. Furthermore, she has issues with substance addiction. Story 40. I'm 42. My best friend from the time I was 15 became pretty politically active. He custom paints motorcycles, so he has been immersed in that whole culture, not the weekend warrior type, but real bikers and bike mechanics. When my daughter came out, he had many opinions and doubts. It took 3 snide remarks, despite my warning him after the first, before I ended the friendship. We argued the last time we talked, and I told him I was done. He called my parents to complain. They called me, and I told them, I don't see how this is your business at all. This was 2 years ago. Story 41. My wife ended her friendship of 20 years after her former best friend was rude at my mother's funeral. I also severed ties with a friend and gym owner of the place I used to train at because I was tired of his passive-aggressive remarks. Story 42. Here's another perspective for anyone reading this thread. I was the one who got cut off about 10 years ago. I was struggling with addiction and was a bad friend. We were living together, and when my now ex-partner found out I was pregnant, he left. Justifiably, I was in a difficult place for many years after. That relationship ended recently, and I was having a really bad day, so on a whim, I decided to call him. Apparently, he had moved back to the state years ago, and we caught up while we were both stuck in traffic. A week later, he came over for dinner and met both my children. A month after that, we attended a music festival together, just like old times. I'm in a much better headspace now, and we went back to being best friends like before. People can be forgiven. People can change and grow. I'm so happy to have my friend back, and here's to many more years together. Story 43. We live in different cities now. She would visit other friends here, but would only contact me when she needed a ride. I realized this when I felt hurt. Gray sent the inevitable text. Hey, I miss you. I'm coming to my city. Can you meet me at place and drop me off at place far from meeting place? Far from my home? Sigh. No. Story 44. I had a best friend for nearly 25 years. We met as youngsters, enjoying parties and outings together. I settled down, got married, and started a family. She was involved in everything, serving as my maid of honor and godmother to my children. I never once neglected our friendship. Then, around 2 years ago, something changed. I was always the one to call her, arrange outings, listen to her music, go on her walks, visit her favorite bars, and meet her acquaintances to please her. One night, after I believed we were having dinner together, she took me to a sleazy pub where another random man was waiting. I was furious. Not once over the years had she inquired about my children or my husband. That's when I finally knew I was done. I walked out, called my husband to pick me up, and I haven't heard from her since. This is heartbreaking. Story 45. I had a friend who was obsessed with zombies, everything related to zombies. He had zombie-themed merchandise, including guns and a bug-out bag. One day I said, "You know, zombies aren't real." He replied, "No, but Mexicans are." That was our last conversation. Story 46. He sent me a video from a gas station security camera of him inappropriate behavior with a drunk woman and bragged about it to me. Story 47. He was always fairly liberal in high school and college, but in his 20s, he fell on hard times and moved to Grand Junction to live with his mother and stepfather, who held strong libertarian beliefs. My friend was often a follower, adopting the hobbies and beliefs of whoever was the dominant person in a group. Knowing nobody but his family there, his stepfather became that person. He started buying into various conspiracy theories, never fully embracing QAnon but sharing related content on social media. Then in 2020, my grandmother slipped and fell, was hospitalized, contracted COVID-19, and passed away. I posted something on social media addressing people, not targeting anyone specifically, just those who were too selfish to wear masks and practice social distancing. He responded, "Who cares? She was old. She was going to die soon anyway." I replied, "That was my grandmother." And he blocked me. Story 48. On New Year's Eve, people were leaving. One friend had a deaf girlfriend who claimed she could read lips, but she often misunderstood and responded incorrectly. As my friend with his girlfriend and my other friend and his wife were leaving, she was at the door. The first couple gave me a hug, and my friend jokingly grabbed my backside while hugging. I did the same back, and his wife noticed, laughing and grabbing my backside too. I hugged her and returned the gesture. The deaf girlfriend looked back alarmed and then exited. I thought nothing of it. However, being deaf, she had no idea of the context and later called everyone, claiming I was trying to cause drama. I cut them off and never spoke to them again. Story 49. A friend canceled his attendance at our housewarming party through a message sent by his wife, just an hour before the event. I had already paid the caterer for food for him, his wife, and his brother, whom he had asked if he could bring. He has always been incredibly unreliable and unaccountable, and I had finally had enough after 35 years of friendship. I have not spoken to him since. I miss our history and shared memories, but he was a source of stress and pain for many years, and I have been happy to move on. He has a history of similar behavior with others as well. He has a great personality but a poor character. Story 50. She was having an affair with my niece's dad, whose new girlfriend was 10 weeks pregnant. It was wild. Story 51. Only getting in touch when it suited them, never answering messages from anyone else, and going out of their way to be with others instead of us. Story 52. Mine is more boring than most of these, but basically we only talked if I reached out first. We only hung out if I suggested it. They bailed on me a lot too. The last straw was meeting their new partner, who was just a complete jerk. The partner ended up leaving in the middle of all of us hanging out in a very strange and abrupt way. My friend and I continued our afternoon together, but it was very awkward. After I got home, I decided to see if they would reach out first. They didn't. We aren't friends anymore. Story 53. Her boyfriend of almost 10 years hadn't changed. He had gotten much worse. He is a very racist and homophobic man. I couldn't do it anymore. Story 54. My friend was very selfish and toxic, always focused on her own problems. I found out she was having an affair with my boyfriend, but that did not end our friendship. The breaking point came when she had multiple affairs while married. She told me her husband agreed to buy her a beach house if she had his baby, and she went through with it. I couldn't bear the thought of that poor baby being unloved. Story 55. One became a supporter of Donald Trump, one became a pro-police advocate, and one turned out to be a self-centered and condescending individual. Story 56. At lunch, she asked me how my life was going, and I shared some struggles I was facing with one of my children. I asked for her advice. She looked thoughtful for a moment and then said, "Do you think I should go back and get that dress?" She hadn't listened to a word. She never did. I was tired of feeling exhausted. Story 57. Two friends ganged up and accused me of something I didn't do. They persisted in their accusations. I stood my ground and blocked them on all platforms. I highly recommend taking a stand in such situations. Story 58. He molested his daughter and was sent to prison for over 10 years. I heard every excuse from him for what happened, but the prosecutor had him on tape admitting it. Good riddance, but he was my best friend from middle school into my 30s. Story 59. I was dumped by my best friend of 18 years after she celebrated on October 7th. I believe it was partly an excuse because I had also moved to a different country, and long distance was too much of a hassle for her. Additionally, she disapproves of my lifestyle since I am single and child-free while she is married with 3 kids. It was difficult, but you learn to find your own closure. I will not respond to any political comments. Story 60. Going through a near-death experience and being pushed away while being told I talk too much made me realize they weren't true friends. A real friend cares unconditionally. Story 61. How do I describe the series of events? Well, this friend had a mental breakdown and proceeded to assault his wife, got arrested, sent inappropriate pictures to the girls in the group, sexually harassed a woman in our group by asking multiple times if he could groom her, and then had a hysterical meltdown claiming we were all horrible people for playing the Harry Potter video game. He then abandoned his family to run off with his new girlfriend, leaving his wife and child behind. So we are no longer friends. Another friend was dealing with bipolar disorder and became unbearable to be around. Trying to have a conversation with her was like talking to a wall. She would rapidly cycle from one topic to another, sharing all these plans she had for her life and then changing completely an hour later. 1 minute she would say, "I want to be married and have a baby within 2 years." And the next, "I'm thinking of dating girls instead." It was, "I'm going to keep living with my parents while I get my life together." And then, "I'm going to move out and leave my pets with my parents." Getting her attention was challenging. It was as if she was looking through you, not at you. I tried to tell her she was having an episode and needed help, but she said I was just judgmental and that she never wanted to speak to me again. I just couldn't deal with her constant self-inflicted crises, so I was glad to end the friendship. Story 62. Alcoholism has ruined 28 years of close friendship because he would rather sit at a bar getting drunk every night than maintain any semblance of the bond we once shared. Story 63. I was cut off by a friend I had for over a decade, my best friend through high school and college. She cut off everyone, the whole friend group. She just disappeared. She became an extremist and didn't talk to Americans anymore. Your mother is American. Only your father is Iranian. We tried calling her a few years after she left, and a man answered, claiming to be her husband, and said he would harm us if we tried calling again. That's fine. I'm not dealing with that nonsense. She blamed white people for the reasons she couldn't get a job in her field after graduating college in 2009. That's right. The job market in 2009 was bad, so she went completely off the deep end. I have no idea where she is now. Story 64. I had my favorite skinny Levi's stolen from my hotel room while I was asleep. My friend and I had to sleep in the same bed where her sick husband had been all day, and we both ended up getting sick. She repeatedly lied for weeks, claiming that she had mailed the jeans back. Story 65. This may sound petty without further context, but she didn't come to my birthday party and instead went out with friends she had just met. When our mutual best friend confronted her about it, she lied and claimed that I had blocked her on everything because she didn't have a way to get to the party. I even offered to give her a ride, but she repeatedly read my messages without replying. That was the last straw for me. She lied about me despite my proof that she was not telling the truth. At that point, I was already ready to distance myself from her for many other reasons. Story 66. The endless self-sabotage and aggressive defense of her poor choices finally affected me. I can't continue supporting her as she enters a stable situation and then destroys it by making choices like cheating on her partner, creating a medical dilemma, or starting a fight with a group of strangers. Story 67. I'm really concerned about your drinking. I hate to say it, but man to man, I think you have a problem. I'm all for having a good time, but your consumption affects your personality, mood, and decision making. I'm scared for you, brother. I really am. This is not a normal circumstance or habit. I'm happy to help, and I'm here for you because I care enough to say this when others won't. I think you need help. Yeah, I think I just need a girlfriend. Story 68. We grew apart. I was immature and he was mature. I stopped being his friend because we fought frequently. I made new friends and so did he, so we moved on and never reconnected. Story 69. They borrowed money. When I came back to ask for it, I was hit with, "Come on, man. I don't owe you that much?" "Yes, you do." He thought I wouldn't remember every cent I lent him. He was maxed out on credit cards and $75,000 in debt to lenders already. I should have seen the red flags in the beginning. The final straw was when he needed a place to stay and asked me to loan him $200 too. He then bought new clothes and shoes the same week with my money while staying with me. It made me really upset when I couldn't eat, and he bought trendy shoes and clothes. The guy is foolish with money. Story 70. She was my best friend. We grew up together and traveled across the country to attend university and study nursing together. However, in our second year, she started dating someone unsuitable and began mimicking his behaviors. She quit her job and her university course to play video games with him all day, ultimately losing her flat and moving into homeless accommodation with him. Initially, she told me she had developed chronic pain, so I worked an overtime shift once a week and passed the money directly to her to help out. I later found out she had been dishonest and using me when she accidentally sent a text mocking my naivety that was meant for him. I decided to cut her off. It has been 10 years, and she recently tried to add me on Facebook. It turns out she had 6 children with him before he left her, and every post on her page was begging for money or promoting schemes. It was difficult, but I blocked her. Story 71. I had known both of them since the 1990s, in middle school, him, and high school, her. We had our ups and downs and were already on the ropes because of the very different paths we had taken. They were married with children, living in her childhood home, while I was single and moving every 2 to 3 years. I was closer to him. Then the pandemic happened. We were already down to email and occasional texting, so it wasn't the lockdown that affected us. It was the vaccine. I teach in a medium-sized school district. By the time the vaccine rolled out, 3 teachers, an aide, and a couple of students had died in my district. We had been through a great deal with hybrid learning and quarantining, constantly worrying and fearing for our safety, riding a roller coaster of anxiety every time someone sneezed or coughed. The vaccine was such a relief. It wasn't a cure, but it was a shining ribbon of hope. I mentioned it in passing to him, and he said he didn't see why it was so important. He insisted he wasn't going to bother to get it. My father, my white, male, conservative baby boomer father, had received the vaccine. Both my brothers, one of whom is essentially a hermit due to how rarely he goes out, had gotten the shot. My principal sent around a document to organize coverage so that staff could go get the shot during the school day as needed. And this man didn't think it was important. It was just the last straw. I told him he was being foolish, deactivated the email I mostly used to communicate with him, and walked away. It's obviously been several years, but neither of them has ever reached out to me, so I guess we were on the same page about our friendship in the end. Story 72. They only reached out when they needed something, specifically money, rides, or alcohol. One day, he planned a party and wanted me to pay for it. When I confronted him about it, he became angry and tried to turn our group of friends against me. About half of them did. It completely shattered our friend group that we had maintained for over a decade. Story 73. I had a best friend for 12 years, but I had to cut her off when I realized she was playing mind games with me instead of being honest. I value transparency, and the constant manipulation was the final straw. Story 74. I realized they never considered me a friend. I was just a laughingstock. What hurt was that I still craved their acceptance even after I had the opportunity to be away from them. Took a while to completely cut them off, but it felt good. Story 75. Friends since grade school. She was the world's biggest flake. It didn't matter what the event or who was involved. If she wasn't interested, She would simply not show up and never communicate. People often asked why I tolerated her behavior, and the final straw came when she said she would visit my home after my son was born. I put all my energy into cleaning the house, even mopping. Guess who flaked? She claimed she was too tired after her facial appointment and chose to go home instead. I never wasted another moment on her after that. Good riddance. Story 76. I ended all friendships. I had bigger ambitions than sitting around and using drugs. I saw them after 5 years, and they were all still doing the same things. I told them not to contact me again. I haven't seen or heard from them since. It's been about 15 years. Story 77. I ended my friendship with the entire group because one member dismissed J.K. Rowling's support for anti-trans activities, including funding hate groups, as internet drama, and said people were just mad at her over a difference of opinion. I called out this mentality, and no one supported me. I am non-binary. People in the group often expressed their love for me, but it seems that was not genuine. Story 78. She wouldn't let me meet her partner or the person she had a mortgage with. I gave her 3 months' notice of my visit, but she said she was too busy to see me because it was her partner's birthday and they were having a party, to which I was not invited, even though one of his friends was an old friend of mine from school. After that, she blocked me, and I have never heard from her again. Story 79. I asked her why she couldn't show up on time for our standing meeting every Friday. She reacted strongly and suggested that I was the problem instead of acknowledging her chronic lateness and lack of communication. Story 80. She went out clubbing with my other best friend, whom I have known longer. She got drunk and had an argument with my best friend, during which she physically assaulted her. I cut her off after the incident. Story 81. Actively intervening to draw attention to themselves and block me from sharing my story about the crisis I was experiencing. I realized that they had been a frenemy all along. Story 82. Sending strange witchcraft and voodoo practices after me. It's mildly annoying when others express how much they miss me. Story 83. They didn't want to celebrate our joint birthdays as we had planned. Then they told me that if I had been more excited about it, I wouldn't have let them cancel. So, they were just acting as a conduit for my feelings, and it was actually my fault that the celebration didn't happen. Story 84. She lost her temper when I told her that, although I love her adult children, I didn't want to include them in our dinner plans the day after another dear friend of mine died unexpectedly. My mind was racing with so many awful and sad thoughts, and I just needed my friend, not an entire audience. It wasn't the first time she had been unkind to me. We will never be friends again. That was just the last straw. Story 85. When she dropped my iPhone and broke the screen after I asked her to leave it on the table and did not offer to help fix it. Story 86. My closest friend died in an accident. I was going insane and couldn't sleep for days. They told a mutual friend that I needed to get over it. Story 87. I moved across the country for work. Ever since then, whenever I reached out to her, she would always say that I never contacted her enough and would have a bad attitude. We had been friends since I was a toddler. Eventually, she became angry with me, so I kept my distance for a while and later discovered that she had deleted me on Facebook. Good riddance, I suppose. Story 88. She told me that parenting 2 kids wasn't that hard when she only had one and babysat another while being a stay-at-home mom. While I worked full-time and had 2 kids under 2, she suggested that I should have hot meals ready and waiting for my husband. Story 89. She had a history of being very critical of my dating decisions, which I always justified as her wanting what was best for me. Whenever I tried to talk to her about how she hurt my feelings, she would become defensive, cry, and blame me. After 10 years of the same pattern and her making similar poor decisions, I shared some concerns about someone I was dating, comparing my feelings about a situationship that turned into a friendship which felt much warmer. She began yelling at me, claiming I was being foolish and that the friend didn't truly want me and was just using me. I tried to explain that he had been a good friend for years and that I had respectfully ended our friends with benefit situation once I developed feelings. However, she cut me off, continued scolding me, and made hurtful comments. It took months to gather the courage to tell her that she hurt my feelings without even listening to me and that I didn't want to share my love life with her anymore, although I wanted to preserve our friendship outside of that. She cried and yelled that she was being honest and trying to protect me, insisting I made poor decisions and expected her to support me regardless of my choices. Then, she texted me to say she loved me but needed time to process everything. I replied with a simple acknowledgement and never spoke to her again. Story 90. She was an alcoholic and stayed with my parents following major surgery related to her drinking. It took her betraying them for me to finally see that she was not a good person who would never change. I think about her often, but I only miss the girl from my memories, not her current self. Another longtime friend got into meth, and I decided to stop engaging with her entirely. It helped so much that I moved away from my hometown. Story 91. She pushed my fiancé down the stairs and threw a shoe at another friend. The final straw was when I found out I had epilepsy, and she blocked me temporarily because it was too much for her at that moment. So, I blocked her forever. Story 92. My best friend since 2009. We lived together. I have a folder on my phone with pictures of his baby. They were family. Our mutual friend died unexpectedly at 33, which shook us. He left the gym after our workout, and his heart stopped 2 hours later. Anyway, my best friend and I talked a lot in the days after. We made plans and expressed how much we needed to make an effort to be in each other's lives. One night, I asked him if he wanted to play Call of Duty with the guys. He left me on read. That was November 9th, 2024. We both just stopped. Story 93. When everything revolved around her, I was pregnant and did not want to tell her because I knew she would not be happy for me. When she found out from someone else, she called me, and it confirmed my thoughts. Story 94. It's a long and complicated story, but they distanced themselves from me after my stepfather died because they felt I had changed and did not like the person I had become. To be fair, I wasn't myself after the grief, but I would like to think she would show me some grace after 15 years of friendship. We eventually reconciled, but my trust in her was diminished, and I realized that we fundamentally did not enjoy being around each other anymore. Story 95. Best friend of over 20 years. Meth and his friends who surf couches. The stress of having to kick the current couch surfer out, only for another one to move right in. I hope you're doing well, but I want nothing to do with you or your friends ever again. Story 96. I started noticing that the energy was off, as I needed to recover from my encounters with her. Then she told me she was pregnant. I said congratulations, but she responded by asking what I was congratulating her for. I stopped initiating contact, and then out of the blue, she texted me a picture of the baby. What was I supposed to say? Obviously not congratulations, since that was the wrong answer last time. So I blocked her. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.